Hey everybody, it is Friday towards the end of April. I just wanted to touch base with you. I haven't done one of these for a while, and I'd like to look into maybe doing some in the future. Um, get a little bit more into talking about what we see, what we observe, maybe just a little bit of special and general relativity, just to give you an idea. I'm going to load it to YouTube and allow you good folks to see it if you want to, and then share it. Just a few thoughts about our stationary topographical plane that we live on. Just a few thoughts. Before I read anything, it's interesting how we observe a stationary topographical plane. We don't see movement. We don't see any observations that tell us that we're moving, but we are taught that we are moving. And because we are taught that we're moving, even though we don't experience it or observe it, we have gone with our indoctrination, with our education, with our brainwashing. So the most important thing I want you to kind of know about is that we don't see or observe or experience any movement around the sun. We don't observe the spinning, watery, curvy, bendy ball that we are on or we're told we're on. We don't experience any of that. So here we go. We think it's a ball, though it measures flat. We think the earth spins, though we don't feel it. We think the earth moves around the sun, though we can't measure it. We think water curves around the ball, though we can't see it. We think light curves in the medium of air, though we can't prove it. We think gravity exists, though we can't explain it. We think there is a universe out there, though we can't verify 95% of it, which is dark matter. And for some people who think that we live on a spinning, watery, curvy, bendy ball in the vacuum of outer space, we think we are smart, though we are actually very dumb. All of our natural experiences, our senses, tell us we live on a stationary topographical plane. Large bodies of water at rest do not bend. The horizon is horizontal. The sky moves around us, the sidereal rotation. The motion of the sun is never seen. We don't experience it. We don't experience us moving around the sun. Our earth, or the ground we walk on, measures flat. We don't notice spin. We don't see light bend. We can't define gravity. We can't prove it, either Newton's gravity, mass attracts mass, or Einstein's gravity, which is the bending and warping of space-time. We cannot measure it. Again, we have dark energy out there in the universe somewhere that is 95%. It's called dark matter, and it makes general relativity work if we just work with the 5%. It makes no sense. We have an elliptical orbit instead of a circular orbit because it works in the math. The reason they don't tell us we live in a circular orbit is the math doesn't work. So they have to make an elliptical orbit so it works. We don't live in a mathematical equation. But they have to use elliptical orbits to make their math work. Relativity says we can't see the motion of the Earth. It looks like we're the center, and our coordinate system, which is the sun going around the Earth, it appears that way, but we're told that it is the Earth that is moving around the sun. We have an early warning system that was established in 1957, which basically keeps us from looking at the North Pole and going there and seeing what's actually there. Then, as many of you know, we have the Antarctic Treaty that was signed in December of 1959 that went into effect in 1961, which basically says that you can't freely and privately explore the Antarctic region unless you have permission or pay usually a pretty large amount of money to take a boat ride from the southern part of South America to a little peninsula in the Antarctic region. And you want to know where? It is Article 6, paragraph 1 through 6. We build everything as if it's on a horizontal plane. And then the most important thing is we can empirically and physically validate our stationary topographical plane. Here's just a few little sayings that you might want to think about, maybe incorporate into your thinking processes and share them with other people. The eyes are useless when the mind is blind. We are all born into a prison system we cannot see, therefore we cannot get out of. But when the veil is lifted from our eyes, there is no turning back. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the ability to think for yourself. If the evidence of one's senses are to be believed, then in the mind the magic is made real. We are told that we live on a spinning, watery, curvy, bendy ball, and then in our mind, the magic, heliocentrism, Earth around the sun, the magic is made real. That's so true. What we've basically seen is the doctors of divinity, Catholic Church, have become the doctors of science. They fabricate a whole new reality for us, and they tell us to reject the testimony of our own senses. And then there's only one place left to put our trust, and that is in these doctors of science. And even Cardinal Wolsey of the Catholic Church said at one time, learning against learning. The second learning was biblical learning, using the Bible, the scriptures, and so Wolsey wanted to use learning science against biblical scriptures, learning against learning. So, when one believes the evidence of his own senses and follows the conviction of his conscience, he is free. He has liberty. His mind is independent, and his will is his own. But when one feels bound to reject the testimony of his own senses in favor of a version of reality that he has never seen or tested for himself, he bows his intellect to the superiors and teachers who have done the thinking for him, and that person waits attentively upon them to tell him what he is allowed to believe. That is so true. So, who gets funded more out in this world? Is it the people that believe we live on a stationary topographical plane, or those that believe we live on a spinning, watery, curvy, bendy ball in the vacuum of outer space? Who gets funded more? Let's take an example. Globe Earth, or quote, flat Earth. Since 1958, NASA has been funded approximately $700 billion. Space Force has gotten approximately $50 billion. They came into existence in December of 2019. And there are many, many other space agencies, perhaps 70 or more, and who knows how much they get funded. Education, teachers teaching heliocentrism, maybe, since 1958, $800 to $1 billion through education, through brainwashing, through indoctrination. Entertainment, perhaps $500 billion. When you go to see Maverick, Tom Cruise's latest movie last summer, you had a globe with Universal going across the front of it, if you happen to see that movie. That's been going on with Universal since maybe 1915, 1920. Now, let's adjust for inflation. Could it be that the globe Earth has been funded $8 to $10 trillion, that is 12 zeros, since 1958 from all sources when we adjust for inflation? How much has the stationary topographical plane, or what some people call the flat Earth, been funded since 1958? Perhaps zero? from foundations, NGOs, taxpayer money, borrowed money, printed money. So, is your belief system been bought? Has what you believe in been bought? Think about that. Now, here's some facts for people when we think about this money that we spend to go into outer space, which doesn't exist. 9 million people starve to death in our world every year. 800 million have hunger issues every single day in our world. 900,000 are homeless just in the USA and UK alone, 5% of the world's population. 900,000 are homeless just in those two countries. 25 to 50 billion per year could solve hunger in the USA. NASA and Space Force spend $50 billion or $136 million per day to not explore outer space. Is that evil? I'll let you decide. I've kind of come to this conclusion as I've looked into a little bit of special relativity and general relativity, just starting on quantum mechanics. After spending time looking into Michelson-Morley, the Lorentz contraction, Lorentz transform equation, special and general relativity, the 1919 eclipse, time dilation, length contraction, and Cavendish, it's quite easy to come to the following conclusion. We do not live on a ball. We don't live on a planet, a sphere, a globe, an oblate spheroid, an oscillating spheroid. We just do not. We live on some sort of a stationary topographical plane. And simple ways to know you don't live on a ball. Spinning space ball. Gas pressure without a container, no evidence of Earth curvature, no evidence of a spinning Earth. The sun is now illuminating the moon. We can see farther than we are told we can. Rockets cannot propel off of nothing in the vacuum of outer space, even though they've told you something different. Large bodies of water at rest, seek level. The Selenalian eclipse, or the impossible eclipse, which happened November 9th of 2022, just a few months back, the Selenalian eclipse. So I ask you to trust your own eyes, your own observations, and your own experiences. So, the fairy tales that we gave up as we grew older. We gave up the Tooth Fairy, we gave up the Easter Bunny, we gave up Santa Claus, we gave up the Fairy Godmother. But there's one fairy tale we never gave up, the globe. Please give it up. It doesn't exist. Here's just a few quotes from individuals who would be globe earthers. You'll recognize many of them. This is Edwin Hubble, Hubble telescope. Edwin Hubble, redshift, blue shift, ever-expanding universe, back in the late 1920s. He's famous for that, looking out and telling us that the planets are moving apart, the universe is moving apart from one another. They call that redshift, moving farther and farther apart, as opposed to blue shift when it's coming towards you. And that was evidence of an ever-expanding universe. So Hubble said the following, and he's talking about what's wrong with the Earth being the center of the universe, or our existence. Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, in a sense to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would only be accepted as a last resort in order to save the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all cost. Such a favored position is intolerable. We cannot be the center of the universe or the center of anything. We have to be insignificant. We have to be not important. We have to be the product of the Big Bang of evolution. We cannot be created by a creator. We are just nothing instead of being special. Here is Ian McCausland, 1999, The Anomalies in the History of Relativity. We're going to talk about the 1919 eclipse, May 29th, 1919, that two expeditions looked at. One was Eddington. And in 1999, McCausland said this: if the findings of the eclipse expedition had been announced as being inconclusive instead of decisive in 1919, November 6th, 1919, at the Royal Society, general relativity would have had to compete with other possible theories such as Gerber's to explain certain astronomical observations, and a better theory might eventually have been found. In the author's opinion, the confident announcement of the decisive confirmation of Einstein's general theory 11/7/19, November 7, 1919, was not a triumph in science, as it is often portrayed, but one of the most unfortunate events in the history of the 20th century. John Calvin, one of the ones that stood up against the Catholic Church in the early 1500s, mid 1500s. John Calvin said this: we will see some who are so deranged, not only in religion, but who in all things reveal their monstrous nature, that they will say that the sun does not move, and that it is the earth which shifts and turns. When we see such minds, we must indeed confess that the devil possessed them, and that God sets them before us as mirrors in order to keep us in his fear. George Wald, Origin of Life, Scientific American, August 1954. George Wald, Nobel Prize winner, said the following: when it comes to the origin of life, we have only two possibilities as to how life arose. One is the spontaneous generation arising to evolution. The other is a supernatural creative act of God. There is no third possibility. Spontaneous generation was scientifically disproved 100 years ago by Louis Pasteur, Spallanzani, Redi, and others. That leads us scientifically to only one possible conclusion: that life arose as a supernatural creative act of God. I will not accept that philosophically, because I do not want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible: spontaneous generation arising to evolution. George Wald, Origin of Life, Scientific American, August 1954. Here's Einstein, 1922. While I was thinking of this problem in my student years, I came to know that the strange results of Michelson's experiment. Soon I came to the conclusion that our idea about the motion of the earth with respect to the ether is incorrect, and if we admit Michelson's null result as a fact, this was the first path which led me to the special theory of relativity. Since then I have come to believe that the motion of the earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment, though the earth is revolving around the sun. Strange thing to say. Of course, he had to. In 1922, he had to. He came up with special relativity in 1905. He published his field equations for general relativity November 25th, 1915. So obviously he had to say this. Albert Einstein, how it created the theory of relativity. Einstein also said, to the question whether or not the motion of the earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial is on the earth experiments, we have already remarked in section 5 that all attempts of this nature led to a negative result. Before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled to this negative result. Einstein, Relativity, the Special and General Theory, 1920, page 61. Stephen Hawking, physicist. Many of us know about Stephen Hawking. So which is real? The Ptolemaic, which is geocentric, or the Copernican system, which is the Earth going around the sun? Although it is not uncommon for people to say that Copernicus proved Ptolemy wrong, that is not true. One can use either picture as a model of the universe, for our observations of the heavens can be explained by assuming either the Earth or the sun be at rest. Stephen Hawkins. Here is physicist Richard Wolfson as he was talking about Michelson-Morley, 1887, which we will discuss in just a minute. What happened when the experiment was done in 1887? There was never in any orientation at any time of the year, any shift in the interference pattern, none, no shift, no friend shift, nothing. What's the implication? Here was an experiment that was done to measure the speed of the Earth's motion through the ether. This was an experiment that was 10 times more sensitive than it needed to be. It could have detected speeds as low as 2 miles a second instead of the known 20 miles per second, or 30 kilometers per second around the sun, that the Earth as in its orbital motion around the sun. It didn't detect it. What's the conclusion from the Michelson-Morley experiment? The implication is that the Earth is not moving. Physicist Richard Wolfson. Here is Newton in 1692 in a letter to Richard Bentley in 1692. It is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without the mediation of something else, which is not material, operate upon and affect another matter without mutual contact, as it must do if gravitation, in the sense of Copernicus, is essential and inherent in it. And this is one reason why I desired you would not ascribe innate gravity to me. That gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum, without the mediation of anything else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Newton basically wanted no part of innate gravity. Physicist Henrik Lorentz, Lorentz contraction, Lorentz transform. Briefly, everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest. Have Marcus Crown. Is the Earth at the heart of the giant cosmic void? New Scientist, November 12th, 2008, pages 32 to 35. I will just read a very small part of that. Dark energy, that 95% of the world, of the universe that we just put out there to make general relativity work, is problematic. No one really knows what it is. We can make an educated guess and use quantum theory to estimate how much of it there might be, but then we overshoot by an astounding factor of 10 to the 120th. That is 120 zeros behind the 10. Think about that. Here is Andrew Pensett. He is a Catholic priest, and this is what he said. He wrote, Father George Lamette, the priest who discovered the Big Bang beyond those stone walls, and this is what Andrew Pensett said. Quite often young people ask me the following question: how can you be a priest and believe in the Big Bang? To which I am delighted to respond, we invented it. Or more precisely, Father George Lamette invented the theory that is today called the Big Bang, and everyone should know about him. Invented. Johannes Kepler, one of the 5 giants of heliocentrism. He's the one that came up with the idea of the moon affecting the tides on our round spinning ball, which doesn't exist. I demonstrate by means of philosophy that the earth is round and it is inhabited on all sides, that it is insignificantly small and is born through the stars. Philosophy. Physicist Henry Poincaré, Poincare. A great deal of research has been carried out concerning the influence of the Earth's movement. The results were always negative. Some people will say that Einstein stole general relativity from this gentleman. Astrophysicist Singal, Singal. The apparent alignment in the cosmic microwave background is one particular direction through space is called evil. In other words, the center of the universe being the Earth is considered evil because it undermines our ideas about the standard cosmological model. The Copernican principle seems to be in jeopardy. Astronomer Phil Plant, Plait. I have two things to say that might surprise you. First, geocentrism is a valid frame of reference. And second, heliocentrism is not any more or less correct. Physicist Bernard Cohen, Cohen. There is no planetary observation by which we on Earth can prove that the Earth is moving in an orbit around the sun. Physicist Arthur Eddington, quite famous for looking at the eclipse in May 29th of 1919 and being at the Royal Society November 6th of 1919, where they pushed through Einstein and made Einstein the savior to the world, savior to the ball, when they released the information to the USA and UK press November 6th of 1919. And Einstein woke up in November 7th, 1919, the savior to the ball. This is what Eddington said. There was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to have been nil. Historian Lincoln Barnett. We can't feel our motion through space, nor has any special experiment ever proved that the Earth actually is in motion. Here is physicist Julian Babar, Barbour. Thus, even now, 3.5 centuries after Galileo, it is still remarkably difficult to say categorically whether the Earth moves. Here's Alexander von Humboldt. It's a pretty old quote here. I have already known a long time that we do not yet have proof for the system of Copernicus, but I shall not take the risk to be the first one attacking it. You attack it today, you jeopardize your career, you jeopardize your income, you jeopardize your family, you jeopardize your kids, your children's education, you jeopardize your second car, your second home, your vacation, you possibly jeopardize your spouse, you jeopardize everything, so you just go along. Don't even think twice about it. Arthur Otis, Light Velocity and Relativity, page 58. In the effort to explain the Michelson-Morley experiment, the thought was advanced that the Earth might be stationary. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would have mean in effect that our Earth occupy the omnipotent position in the universe, with all the other heavenly bodies paying homage by revolving around it. We sure can't have that. Physicist Albert Einstein. To the question whether or not the motion of the Earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial on the Earth experiments, we have already remarked that all attempts of this nature led to a negative result. Before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled to this negative result. So, those are some quotes from people that are pretty famous, who are globe earthers, and they basically tell us that it's very possible we're not moving around the sun. That our coordinate system of the Earth going around the sun is the correct one, and not the coordinate system of the sun. Excuse me, that the coordinate system of the sun going around the Earth is the correct one, and that the coordinate system of the Earth going around the sun is the incorrect one. So, again, what do we observe and experience on an everyday basis? We don't experience motion of the Earth around the sun. We see the sun moving around the Earth. Go back to 1887 in Michelson-Morley, and every interferometer experiment since then basically has shown that the Earth is moving at a much, much, much slower rate than what we were told. If you Google the speed of the Earth around the sun, you will get 30 kilometers per second, or 66,600 miles per hour. 30 kilometers per second, or 66,600 miles per hour. That's what you will get if you Google. Michelson-Morley, and every interferometer experiment since then, Dayton Miller did many of them, has shown that the speed of the Earth measures somewhere between 3 and 5 kilometers per second, the most 8 kilometers per second, as opposed to the 30 kilometers per second, or the 66,600 miles per hour that we're told that we're going around the sun. Every interferometer experiment, Michelson-Morley is the most famous, 1887. So, we are not moving at 30 kilometers per second. Now, what accounts for the 3, 5, or 8 kilometers per second? It's very possible it's the sidereal, S-I-D-E-R-E-A-L, rotation of the sky above us, which translates motion to the ground, which explains why if you put your hand above a bathtub of water and shake it without touching the water, it can move the top of the water but not move the bottom of the water that's in the bathtub. So the sidereal rotation translating motion down to the Earth. And that's why you can possibly get a slight Coriolis effect, especially in the southern latitudes of our world. So I just want you to know that they came up with this in every interferometer experiment ever since. So they had Lorentz come up with a contraction, which basically said that we're going to contract the speed of the motion around the sun, but not the perpendicular motion of the light that went into the light going around the sun, and that motion going that way. We're going to contract that just enough that it makes it look as if we are moving around the sun. It's called the Lorentz contraction. Lorentz also came up with the Lorentz transform equation, which basically said that if we have any problems whatsoever and we think that maybe the Earth doesn't have the coordinate system of going around the sun, but it's the other way around with the sun moving around our Earth, then we will invoke the Lorentz transform equation. The Lorentz transform equation secretly and magically transforms the absolute conclusions of a stationary Earth of Michelson-Morley into a relative conclusion of an Earth moving around the sun. It's all done by math, folks. It's all done by science. There is no empirical and physical evidence that you or I live on a spinning space ball in the vacuum of outer space. There is none. We were told either from the crib or from when our parents were flipping through pages when we were 2 or 3, 4 years old, and they were wanting to read to us, and we saw a globe in the pictures. Over when we went into kindergarten, we saw this by the teacher's desk, and then we always saw this by the teacher's desk, and then the entertainment industry told us that we lived on a ball. We believe it to today. We need to realize we don't live on a spinning space ball in the vacuum of outer space. We just don't. Every experiment that's done by a scientist shows that we are 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 8 kilometers, and not 30 or 66,600 miles per hour. And as I explained before, it could very easily be the sidereal rotation of the sky, which translates motion to the earth. Very simple. You ask, why doesn't a stationary topographical plane, flat earth, have a model? Well, because of the advanced warning system in 1957, which basically prohibits travel to the North Pole, some people say within 500 miles. Because of the Antarctic Treaty, signed December of 1959, went into effect 1961, with 12 countries at the time, now 54 out of the 206 that the United Nations recognizes, that we cannot go south of the 60th parallel. And I'm sorry, folks, without permission of the government, some government, we can't go up into the sky. So it's hard to come up with the quote, a model. I do not live on a model. I do not live on a map. I do not live on a simulation. Maybe you live on a model. Maybe you live on a map. Maybe you live on a simulation. I do not. I experience, I observe, and I see a stationary topographical plane. Just let that sink in. You were lied to. You were lied to about many other things as well. But you were lied to about cosmology, about the earth, about the world you walk on. So I wanted to come and just talk briefly. It's about 35, 36 minutes in. Didn't want to take up too much of your time. I could talk a lot more deeply about it. I will perhaps in the future. I wish you all a great, great, great spring. I will be making an effort to make some videos of God's perfect example that He created a stationary topographical plane around Lake Michigan, hopefully with some videos that I can share. Taking videos of Chicago, across Lake Michigan, and other places as well. I will be sharing those as the opportunities arise. I have May, June, July, August, parts of September. So my goal is to make 6, 8, or 10 videos, 30 to an hour long, with some commentary, with video, with some music. So anyway, I wish you all a very, very good day. I wish you a great weekend. May God protect and keep you, and may you come to appreciate God's creation of a stationary topographical plane. Take care.